Okay, so I think everybody that's likely joining us for today are on board with us. My name is Melody Short. I welcome you, each of you, for joining us today to learn more about the Virginia Fresh Food Fund, Fresh Food Loan Fund, presented by Virginia Community Capital. I'm the Community Innovations Advisor, and I'm excited to have you join us today to learn more about the Virginia Community Capital um, Fresh Food Loan Fund, which happens to be a $10 million revolving loan fund to address food access issues in Virginia's urban and rural communities. The fund aims to increase access to healthy food by attracting food retail projects into underserved communities and supporting local agriculture and food enterprises. Before we continue, just a few housekeeping rules. We are recording the webinar and we will send the link to all that registered next week. If you have any questions, we just ask that you submit the questions via the Q&A feature to help us better manage getting your questions answered. You'll find the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. And then without further ado, I would like to introduce our speaker for today, Lauren DeSimone.
Thanks, Melody. I appreciate you all being here with us, and I hope that the information I share is helpful for you. I'm going to give you a little overview, brief overview of what VCC is and does, and then we'll dive into the Virginia Fresh Food Loan Fund. I'm going to give you some examples of communities that we've worked with, and then hopefully that'll give us the remaining time for questions and answers, and certainly anything else that you want to know about. If we can skip to the first slide of the impact in Virginia, I wanted to start there. Thank you. So for those of you who are not familiar with VCC, it's important to note that VCC is a CDFI, which is a community development financial institution. So that means really two things. One, that we provide lending to low to moderate income communities, and two, that we provide technical assistance to go with those lending dollars. We're able to receive philanthropic contributions from partners. We're able to blend that with our own lending capital, and then we essentially have resources that are advantageous to the communities that we serve. We do that in 5 focus areas. And so this slide you see here is a high-level view of what our impact has been to date and some of those focus areas, which are, of course, healthy food access, affordable housing, clean energy, healthcare, and general small business development. So I will reference later the importance of what a CDFI does, especially in the food system development space. But the two things to note there are the lending capital dollars that we have, as well as then the technical assistance that we provide. So if we could go to the slide that starts the Fresh Food Loan Fund. There we go. So the Fresh Food Loan Fund is a revolving loan fund that started back in, I think, 2013, essentially to provide lending capital and technical assistance to further develop food systems in the state of Virginia. The idea is that there hasn't been historically favorable access to food, especially in disinvested communities, and our Virginia Fresh Food Loan Fund is intended to provide that capital and those resources for technical assistance to close the gap. We could go to the next slide. So the majority of the Virginia Fresh Food Loan Fund comes from a CDFI fund grant that we received from the U.S. Department of Treasury, and that is called the Healthy Food Finance Initiative. And there are several CDFIs across the country that receive these HFFI dollars, and we to date, since 2013 at VCC, have received significantly or substantially those funds from the CDFI fund. And those dollars go to, like I said, lending capital with a 0% interest, and then as well development services that allow us to make smaller grants for technical assistance, which I'll get into in a moment. But those are the two primary resources that the Healthy Food Financing Initiative grant dollars afford us here at VCC. And all of that generally is, like I said, in alignment with the mission of the Fresh Food Loan Fund to build health and wealth equity across the state through food system development. And we're really looking at the entirety of the food chain. So historically, we've primarily worked in healthy corner stores development. We've expanded to larger, more traditionally sized grocery stores, But in the most recent few years, we've been looking at the part of the value chain that's the supply chain infrastructure. So looking at our food hubs and aggregators, the distribution of that food, whether it's a fleet of vehicles, et cetera. Historically, we've not done much lending or just generally provided financial support to the production side of the value chain. So we've not necessarily lent to farmers or for land purchase or development. That doesn't necessarily mean that we won't. However, we do work closely with other peer CDFIs. I'm going to give a shout out to Food Shed Capital based out of Charlottesville, who exclusively deal in regenerative agriculture lending. So we might be able to provide support to them as an organization, who in turn then can support the farmers in our community. So I wanted to give you an idea of our path for lending and the resources that we've offered. Next slide. So I want to give you a breakdown of generally how we think about our food system development and investment. And these strategies really make up the core of what we do with the Fresh Food Loan Fund. So the first, obviously, is providing that capital access. And we're really trying to make sure that the access is equitable, so that we at VCC and with our partners are removing barriers to accessing that capital, whether it's certain credit score, more traditional underwriting criteria that has to do with credit scores, or having enough money up front to put down towards that loan that, again, traditional banks require. The tools that we use, mostly that come from our healthy food financing grant dollars, enables us to come in and provide what we call credit or collateral enhancements that actually make up for what a borrower might not be able to afford or able to provide, given their financial history. And that, in turn, hopefully allows them to come to VCC and receive a loan that traditional banking partners would not be able to approve. We're also able to provide technical assistance. So a lot of the work that we do is in the pre-development phase of a project, which means before that project breaks ground, or actually that loan is approved. So that could be hiring a third-party vendor to come up with a feasibility study or a market analysis for a new grocery store or a food hub expansion. We can do energy audits, and then general catalytic grants to help with getting the wheels turning towards, being ready for a loan, but is still small enough that's manageable by that business or organization. And we also work with other service providers, other partners who have their own expertise in the technical assistance arena that we can bring to the table and call on them to provide that thought leadership or their own network in a hyper local setting that VCC might not have as much familiarity in. So we're very well versed in I call it air traffic controlling, all the different levels of expertise and where they are geographically across the state, to make sure that we're, again, doing that heavy lifting on behalf of the borrower or the organization, and helping guide them through the resource needs that they have. And then a few other direct support areas that we provide, and I'm going to go into some detail towards the end of the presentation, but VCC is the CDFI contracted to support the Virginia food. Oops, I think that maybe if you all are still there, my computer did something a little strange. But essentially, we're contracted to provide technical assistance to the grant applicants and awardees from the Food Access Investment Fund. We call that VFAIF. And that fund is housed at the Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. So we work very closely with our partners there to support the program, but most importantly, support the projects that receive these catalytic grant awards, which I'll mention in a moment more details about. We also support the facilitation of the Virginia Good Food Fund that intersects the food system funders and service providers, again, to make that access to communities super easy and convenient. And then we also advise by participation in a advocacy coalition, federal and state food system policies. Next slide, please.
Are you all hearing audio? Because I am not. I want to just make sure it's just not me on my end. Okay, I've sent Lauren a message. She's probably having some audio issues. If you can just bear with us, sometimes technology is not always on our side. So give us just a few moments so that she can work on her audio. Thank you all for letting us know.
I think I'm back. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Thank you, Lauren.
It's spooky season. Maybe there's a poltergeist. I'm not sure what's happening with my computer. So thank you for bearing with me. I'm not sure if you entirely missed everything I just said. I'm going to just jump right back in and certainly can take questions if I was not able to be heard by you all. So the slide that you see here is detailing the steps or the order in which we start to work within a community on a project. And I was starting to talk about the example of a traditional grocery store and what goes into actually opening a store in the community. And this is just an average, and it is specific to food retail. So if we're talking about food hubs or other parts of the value chain, these numbers might be a little different, but just to give me an idea of how much heavy lifting is required to actually open the doors of a food access investment. So for grocery stores, the average nationally is about 3 to 4 years of pre-development support for a store. And that could be anything from grants to support the feasibility studies or pro forma development. It definitely includes having partners at the table like the local municipal leadership, whether it's the board of supervisors or it's the city manager or the mayor. Often foundations are a part of that development talk. There might be catalytic grants like the Virginia Food Access Investment Fund. That's what it's exactly designed to do. So those 3 or 4 years are just bringing people together, moving some small amounts of money around. And that doesn't even have to do with actually breaking ground and opening the store. Once you break ground, it's another 7 years on average to break even. So that on average is about a decade's worth of support and effort and investment of time and resources to actually have a successful grocery store in a community where there maybe wasn't one, in the interest of improving food access and food security there. So that's a lot of work. And that's exactly the role of CDFIs, certainly other partners too, but that's what we're made to do, is to develop those relationships, to have those staged resources, obviously lending, ending with the lending component, but all along the way, having those quarterbacks, if you will, calling the plays, gathering and facilitating the conversations, so that decade's worth of effort actually, results in something that's sustainable. So here you see that first arrow is the pre-development support I mentioned. All along the way, we're also wanting to make sure that the community voice is heard. There's no better way to represent the ground truth and the lived experience than to have community residents at the table advising, right? Like helping to make decisions around the investment. You can sit in a room, and throw all the money at the wall for opening up a grocery store. But if you're not actually engaging with the community on the ground and what their realities are, it's going to be a lot more difficult to sustain that store opening. Along the way, we also want to make sure that those lived experiences and the community residents that we're engaging are compensated for their time. Just like you might have an MBA graduate with this long list of experiences in the business consulting world be a part of thinking about the business side of the grocery store, so too do these community residents offer a unique and very valuable history and experience that should be valued, right? Like it's not just asking, knocking on doors and asking for some conversation, some time. It's saying we value that you come from a community, you have this lived experience, and we want to compensate that for you, or compensate you for that. So back to the pre-development, there's maybe some technical assistance, some service providers in the mix. It's really nice to have that grease on the wheels to get the wheels turning in the form of catalytic grants. And that's exactly what the Virginia Food Access Investment Fund is intended to do. That came about after about 6 years of advocacy. It was legislation enacted in 2020. The first fund round went out in 2021, and we're about to open the third round in November, on November 1st. And I'm going to mention that in a moment. But those catalytic grants really, again, grease the wheels to get traction towards loan preparedness. They might be restricted, so they might only be able to go to buying equipment or purchasing Virginia grown produce, or they could be open and used as necessary for, part of the capital stack required for a project. But that grease on the wheels is super important so that there is the momentum building towards a loan. And then when we get to the point where a project is ready for financing, we call that, the jargon, the lingo is a capital stack that we're putting together. And that capital stack, in all of my years with VCC, I realized I didn't even introduce myself or give you my background. I can do that in a bit. But I've been with VCC now for almost 5 years. And in that time, 100% of the projects I've worked with have required diverse funding sources. So that's what we call as a diverse or a creative capital stack. So it might be, if we're thinking about a pie, it might be like 30% financing from a bank or a CDFI. It might be 10% private equity or personal investment of savings. It might be 30% state grants. It might be a few federal grants. It might be a locality. Some localities have their own funds. They might have a health equity fund. It might be a foundation contributing. So again, 100% of the projects that I've worked with have very many funding resources that are coming to the table to make that loan happen. And usually they're all identified first. And what the loan ends up being is that last bit that closes the need for the total project cost. So generally, the work I do is to ask and work with the business or the organization to find all of those different funding sources, identify them, line them up, and then we say, okay, we're ready to pull the trigger on approving a loan or applying and then approving a loan just to get that project to the finish line. So that's kind of the order of how we think about putting those pieces together. And then last but most important is the capacity and the expertise with me and my colleagues to continue supporting this project or these projects in these communities. So hopefully a business will have, as they grow, additional funding needs. They might be eligible for additional grants. They might need to expand, open another location. So hopefully they're able to come back to VCC and apply for whatever those resources are to carry them through the next growth stage of their business. So we are really wanting to invest, most importantly, in building that trust and that respect with the business, with the borrower, the organization, so that as their needs continue to evolve, we're able to be there in step to provide those resources with them. Next slide, please. So here is an example of how it all works, because it's a lot of like theory, right? A lot of heavy stuff. And it's like, well, what does that actually look like in a community? And I'm gonna give a shout out to Karen. I think I saw you in the audience of Youth Earn and Learn. So if you're there, hello. But this is an example of how all these different sources of funding come together and who's on the other side of that receiving it. So on the left, you see that green portion, and that's all of the different funding sources. And on the right are actual businesses and nonprofits who've benefited from these funding sources. So this is an example of the Norfolk food ecosystem in Norfolk, Virginia. I'm going to show you some photos of everyone in just a moment. But this is an example of a loan or more from VCC, technical assistance in the form of a grant provided by VCC, a catalytic grant award from the Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, that then requires that recipient to offer Virginia Fresh Match, which is a nutrition incentive program that doubles the SNAP dollars. So any retailer that accepts SNAP EBT payments from customers actually are able to double that so that the customers will get twice as much produce for their purchase. And that is supported by grant dollars. And then also, I believe it's been a healthcare foundation and another bank and a few other funding sources all have shown up and invested in this community to do the following. One is the St. Paul's Community Development Corporation, who's been sort of the backbone of this ecosystem vision. They support directly a variety of things, housing, affordable housing, certainly food, transportation. But I was starting to work with them about how they can support reopening a grocery store in the St. Paul's community in Norfolk that had recently closed, I think just before the pandemic. And this is still an ongoing effort, but because of some of the resources I've just mentioned, they were able to work with Park Avenue Market to actually be the sort of hub for increasing the refrigeration and the freezers in that store to accommodate additional produce, meat, and dairy for the community residents that live nearby, which for which are, many of them are walking to the store. They don't necessarily have the transportation, so they're able to walk to the store there. Youth Earn and Learn also is a part of benefiting from some of this investment. And Youth Earn and Learn is basically a workforce development organization specifically helping kids and youth build the skills necessary for jobs. And this is an after school program. And part of it is that they're able to actually sell produce and sell healthy food boxes and other kind of packaged ways of delivering the food for money, right? And they're learning the skills that go along with that, but they're doing that in a mobile way. So they're actually showing up in certain residential living areas or at a senior living residence or other places that could benefit from having that access right in the backyard of where they live. And so Youth Earn and Learn and the Community Development Corporation actually collaborated due to some grant funding and newly created a food pharmacy program, which is an actual doctor prescribing food as medicine. And I believe this was exclusively for seniors. But that was a packaged amount of food that's healthy, fresh produce actually delivered to these seniors, I believe for free, as a prescription from the doctor. And that Park Avenue Market has been involved or supporting this produce prescription program as the hub for which these packs of healthy food can stay in the cold storage before they're ready for delivery. And Karen, if you're here, I hope I got that all right. But that is a really wonderful example of how it requires a lot of players on the community side and a lot of funders on the resource side to make this all happen. And I think that I have labels. If you were to advance, there's some animation there. I'm not sure if it's going to advance the next slide. If you're able to click, and it might just show you. Yeah. So I basically put that previous staged, order from the previous slide onto this so you understand how that's working. So we had the support with St. Paul's Community Development Corporation over at least a year plus of just conversations before any action was taken. You have Youth Earn and Learn directly hiring community residents as part of the workforce training, of course, but also investing in wealth building opportunities in the community. You have Catalytic Awards that grease the wheels to actually have something brand new created, which is this food pharmacy program. And then there's a creative capital stack that has supported this expansion at the Park Avenue Market that also serves as the hub for some of these healthy food programs and options. So that's a really great example of, again, an ecosystem of a village coming together to support the need. And if you advance to the next slide, I think the next two are photos that we have. So this first photo is the CDC in St. Paul's community delivering food right as the pandemic is starting, just for free, just to get the food into the community because the grocery store there had closed. On the right is Park Avenue Market as it is right now. And just outside of the photo that you see there is the storefront of the expansion of the market. If you go to the next slide. You have a photo of Youth Earn and Learn there on the left. And some of Karen's youth there with their pop-up market stand with the food. And on the right there, you have, it's the table that is promoting that produce prescription program. You can see the St. Paul's Community Development Corporation that also represents the collaboration with Youth Earn and Learn. You can see there in the back, I think that's a Bon Secours mobile health clinic there. So it's really honing in how much food plays a part of health equity and of social determinants of health, in addition to economic development. So another story I wanted to share is a rural grocery store that we've worked with. It's the only grocery store in 3 counties, 3 whole counties, and it's the only store. And this opportunity was to refinance their existing real estate loan, as well as to provide a loan for equipment so that they also could expand their cold storage and frozen storage so they could offer more produce, meat, and dairy selections for their customers. This involved VCC's relationship as a CDFI with the Small Business Administration, SBA. There's a special really portfolio or category of products there that we can use to help make a loan the most advantageous for a borrower. And so in this case, it's the SBA's 504 loan that we were able to use. And the store received a VFAIF grant, or the Food Access Investment Fund. So this is an example of a rural area very much in need of improving healthy food access. And again, back to that diverse capital stack of beginning to see how different funding resources are brought together to support the financial needs of this store in the community. Can we advance to the next? This is another example, a little bit of a smaller scale. This is Doña Fair in Harrisonburg. They applied for and were awarded a VFAIF grant. It's the Food Access Investment Fund. It was just shy of $22,000, just a little over $22,000. And that again was to increase their cold storage. They could add more healthy food products to their inventory for their community. They are right in the middle of a predominant and very concentrated Latinx community, most of whom only are able to walk to the store, who don't necessarily have access to transportation. So this is the store that they go shop at. It's much more of a smaller format, probably 2 or 3 aisles, pretty small. And so it's really important that these owners there are able to maximize the space and thus the inventory they can offer their greater community, as it's one of the only resources that they have to access healthy food. Next slide, please. And then this is an example of a technical assistance grant. So this is LEAP out in Roanoke. They worked with VCC to receive some grant dollars to go towards a feasibility study. So the barn-esque structure that you see there is actually an old, I think it's a police horse stable that they were able to have and convert into cold storage, so that they could aggregate healthy, or not even healthy, certainly it's healthy, but fresh produce from farmer peers and partners that they have in the area, and store it there. That can be sent off, whether it's to wholesale accounts like at a store, or they also have a produce prescription program. They have a mobile market where they can, again, bundle up the different sources of produce that they have and then put it on their van and then take the van out into the communities that they serve. There's a whole host of things and programs that are anchored by this food hub, and the feasibility study was helping to ensure that if they were to go ahead and, this is a few years ago, invest in acquiring this facility and building it out, that it would serve their needs and it would be financially sustainable. And actually on the left there is a farm visit, one of their farmers that they source from, and they've just harvested those greens. They're packing them up and they're going to be shipping them back to this cold storage food hub for further distribution. This is an example where VCC provided some of the need for that feasibility study in the way of hiring a third-party vendor who exclusively does feasibility studies to come in and work their magic and produce this report that then the food hub was able to use. The food hub also put in some money from their budget so that that total project need or cost was fulfilled. And then I think this is my last slide. I know I've just been rolling with all my talking, so I'll bear with me. This is the last slide, and then you hopefully have some time to have questions answered. But I would be remiss if not to mention the significant social capital that VCC has and is there in position to share with our communities that we serve, with the businesses that we work with, and with our partners and peers. So here's a small but not exhaustive list of the ways that we show up with our thought leadership and our professional expertise. So we, like I mentioned, are the CDFI contracted to provide technical assistance to the Food Access Investment Fund. That's at the Department of Ag. And then as a part of that, any grant awardee that receives a grant has to offer SNAP or accept SNAP from their customers, and then also offer the Virginia Fresh Match program so that we're really maximizing that access to the fresh and healthy produce at the stores. I'm going to also mention that this Food Access Investment Fund has had 3 rounds of funding, or 2 rounds of funding really, last year and then this year. And on November 1st, so right around the corner, the 3rd round is going to open, and there will be about a month and a half of a window to receive pre-proposals. And I am happy to share in the chat a little bit later the website for this, but I wanted everyone to know that this is primarily a grant program. It does need to go to food retailers, but that could be farmers markets, that could be mobile markets, grocery stores, healthy corner stores. It has to have a retail component. And there also needs to be significant community engagement as part of the project. But my role is to help you all, if anyone's interested, think through if your idea or your project is eligible. And certainly if it is, and you are awarded, I will continue to support what you are doing with all the things that I've just mentioned. So just wanted to flag that opportunity as a grant that's upcoming. Moving on, we also, VCC participates in the Food Access Coalition of Virginia. This is about 50 or so organizations, all with the interest of advancing policy, state policy. So this was the organization that helped get the Food Access Investment Fund enacted, put into legislation, having budget allocation from the General Assembly session. And we are continuing to advocate during the General Assembly sessions each year, policy interests that support nutrition and food security across the Commonwealth. The Virginia Good Food Fund is still nascent and it's being built and solidified, but VCC has been one of the co-facilitators of bringing folks to the table with the interest of intersecting the food system funders with the service providers or technical assistance resources. Again, so that we're taking that lift off of the communities, off of the businesses, and instead saying, hey, you in Virginia who might need funding or technical assistance, here's your one door that you need to walk through to have access to this whole network. And so we're still building this, but that is the vision for it. That's very simplified, but that's the vision there. And it also is a great infrastructure for receiving information from the grassroots of who's doing what and what are needs in Virginia, and also to disseminate back down, perhaps from the statewide Food Access Coalition or other more statewide level groups. We could disseminate back down opportunities or resources that might be beneficial to food system value chain assets. And then another is the National Food Lenders Network. So VCC participates in this group. I think they're monthly calls where we get to talk with other lenders across the country. They're all CDFIs about how they do what they do and how they can be better at it, with a nod towards advancing environmental sustainability, certainly affordable food, right? Making sure that that food is accessible in many ways, and then also, most importantly, racial equity, and ensuring that there's equitable access to the resources needed. And I think that's it. My last slide, I believe, is my contact information, email and phone number. And I would say a lot of my colleagues still don't quite understand what I do. So I just say, if it has to do with food, give me a call. It might not be exactly a good fit for the programs that we offer, but I believe that my role is to know about who else is out there, so I can direct you to that appropriate contact. And maybe it is, a good fit for VCC, or, there's something that we can provide as a resource. But if it has to do with food, give us a call. We'll figure it out for you or with you about where the right fit is if it's not here at VCC. And I welcome any questions or comments or thoughts.
Well, thank you so much, Lauren, for sharing all of the information with regards to the Fresh Food Loan Fund. This is now your opportunity. We have 45 participants with us today. There's sure to be questions that you may have. This is a great opportunity for you to ask Lauren directly as it relates to your business or your project. We just ask that you drop your questions in the Q&A section, and I will read them off to Lauren. She will get them answered. So a few of our participants have asked the question as to whether or not this presentation will be sent out. And so, yes, this will be sent out to everyone that actually registered. next week. So be sure to be on the lookout for that. And let me check. Okay. So yeah, that was the question. Will the slide presentation be available? It will be available. It'll be sent your way by next week. And that's to everyone that joined us today, and even those that registered that may not have had the opportunity to join us. I have a question for you, Lauren, from one of our attendees. What options are available to acquire real estate for food systems projects?
That is the question, isn't it? So, I mean, certainly land acquisition, right? There's traditional methods to go through for that. I mentioned that Future Capital, whose primary lending is in regenerative agriculture support, is a resource there. They have a Black Farmer Equity Fund, for example, that I believe still provides 0% interest loans for all things regenerative agriculture. And then there is the Agrarian Trust with the Commons. I'm just looking up right now. If you're not already familiar, in Virginia, we now I think have 3 established land trust designations. One is in Central Virginia. This is also a good shout out to Duran Chavis, who's been working diligently in the greater Richmond area to support farming for farmers of color, but also ensuring that food has a market opportunity. A big focus of his has been land acquisition, and he was very successful in fundraising to be able to officially purchase and put into the land trust I think it's 5-acre piece of property in Petersburg next to a school. So that is a forever preserved amount of land that is to be used for regenerative agriculture, for improving food access, for learning and education in partnership with that school. And that has been, is now managed by the land trust, but will be continued to be, stewarded by folks with aligned interests. So that's another example. And I'm happy to offline talk more or put you in the right direction, depending where you are.
Thank you, Lauren. I have another question. Are you able to connect us with other food access CDFIs to bring our projects and programs into their areas? And if so, how should one proceed?
Yeah. So another benefit, kind of social capital benefit that VCC has is that we were a part of starting the Virginia CDFI Coalition, which is a network of all those CDFIs choosing to participate in the state. And that I think could be a really great way where, certainly we at VCC could develop more of an intentional relationship with this network specific to projects or, opportunities that could help expand food access, right, or improve food access. So I think that's where my mind is going, is we could certainly put a pitch to that network, or show up at a meeting and have this conversation about what would it look like for there to be a spectrum of ways that we could engage the CDFIs, depending where they are, to ensure that you would have the access to those resources, and hopefully the next steps to expand what you're doing. And I see the next question: can prospective food access prospects contact VCC on their own to discuss these funds, or do you prefer to be contacted via a government agency? No, please do. There's my contact information. My role is to, as I said, air traffic control, help you navigate where's the right spot. We definitely have significant relationships with the Department of Ag, with other government departments and agencies. We work very closely with DHCD, Department of Housing and Community Development. So there are a host of agencies that we work with, but it's difficult to know where to go and how to navigate. So that's my role, is to help buffer that. And I do that work for you so that I can hopefully just put you in direct contact with whomever it is, if it's not VCC.
And Lauren, I also, because another question came to the chat, but I deleted it. So be sure to grab Lauren's information from off the screen. Like she said, she is making herself completely available to answer any questions if you want to just kind of have some additional conversation. So her phone number and email address is listed. I think we have another question. Have any of the organizations that have received an investment from VCC gone on to become eligible for lending from a traditional lender?
I think yes. That is a great question, though, for me to know more about, so I could better answer that question. But
I can answer that. I can help you with that, Lauren.
Yeah.
I mean, the answer is yes. And so that is the goal of VCC to, especially for individuals that may not have had any luck at with a traditional lender. In addition to the capital resources, there are technical resources that are available as well, because the goal is to get you buttoned up so that you have the freedom to go wherever, you want. But again, there's value in VCC as well, because, oftentimes where, lower interest rate is being extended, right? And the work that we do is truly community centered. But that's like the long answer to your question. The answer is yes. Any other questions? Lauren, this was amazing. Yeah, we have some more questions. Do you make referrals to traditional lenders to participate in stack financing?
Yes. So within the capital stack, there could be a few different lenders there, and there's a lot of negotiation behind the scenes of who's going to be subordinate to the other, et cetera. But the short answer is yes, and it really just is determined by what makes the most sense for the borrower. So VCC is never gonna, and I didn't even mention this, that a lot of the work that I do, where it's the pre-development support or technical assistance, I'm not bound by any goals necessarily for loans, right? So it might not be, there could be a relationship for a few years that is involving technical assistance, maybe some support grants, capacity building support, et cetera. And it might not end up with a loan at VCC. It might not end up with a loan altogether. It could be a loan that is, financed by a different lender. So I want to make that clear, that this is really, my role is to help advance the food system development from a financing perspective and a funding perspective, but it doesn't have to be, lead generation for VCC's loans. It's nice if it ends up as a VCC loan, but that's not necessarily the way that it's supposed to work. So yes, I mean, if it is in the best interest of the borrower, where there's a traditional banker and then there's us, we work together. We've had our loans be refinanced by a different lender. We've refinanced existing loans that has come from a traditional bank, because we have the resources, such as this Virginia Fresh Food Loan Fund, that it makes the rates more advantageous. And that's why that borrower has chosen to refinance with us. So it goes both ways, but it's ultimately up to the borrower for what makes most sense to them.
Okay, thank you so much, Lauren. How much of the $10 million loan fund has been utilized so far at VCC?
So I'll be really honest with you. I don't really understand. I talk about this $10 million revolving loan fund. That was what was initially invested to start the revolving loan fund back in 2013. But if you're not familiar with revolving loan funds, the idea is that you have this money, it's lending capital, you lend, you make profit from the interest paid, but then it just gets reinvested into the fund. So it doesn't necessarily go to the pockets or the wallets of the bank officials. It's reinvested so that we can continue to lend out. Alongside of that are those healthy food financing initiative grants that I've mentioned. So we've, since the beginning of the program, I think we've received 6 so far that are probably $1.25 million each time we receive them. So we've received about $7 or $8 million over the course of almost 10 years now. And those funds are intended to be leveraged. I'm getting into the weeds with nerdy talk, but they're intended to be leveraged so that even more amounts of capital are available for loans. So the way that we talk about it is, we've received, the initial investment of 10 million. It is a revolving loan fund, so things are put back into the fund as they're paid off or as interest is paid. We continue to receive these grant dollars that just helps make our capital more flexible. And then as a result, we've done over 30 loans, and the value of that is over $25 million. So what started as a $10 million loan fund, added to that from the $6 or $7 or $8 million from grants, has yielded over $25 million in an actual loan valuation, if that makes sense.
Thank you so much. Who was a lovely host? I know I'm showing up as Lauren. Just for those who jumped on a little later, I'm Melody Short. I am a colleague of Lauren's. I am the Community Innovations Advisor with VCC, but also co-founder of the Jackson Ward Collective, if you're familiar with that, and the Richmond Night Market. So I'm happy to be here with you all. And thank you for asking. The next question is, have you created or participated in a land bank?
Short answer is no. Not yet is the better answer. Not yet.
Okay, the next question, how important has the Virginia CDFI fund established? Let me just make sure I'm reading this right. How important has the Virginia CDFI fund established by Virginia Housing Community Development Department been for VCC?
So just like VCC, I've mentioned, has received the federal support from the Department of Treasury, the national or federal CDFI fund, in the form of Healthy Food Financing Initiative dollars. There's been nothing like that at the state level in Virginia. So that CDFI fund that was created basically makes another pot available at a state level to go to CDFIs to support projects. My work with the food system development hasn't directly received or benefited from any investment from the statewide CDFI coalition to VCC, but VCC is eligible and has received support grant dollars to help with the general operation of VCC programs.
Thank you, Lauren. The next question is, how do you partner with local food banks?
So what I didn't even get into today is the makeup of the food system in terms of food and nutrition security. And food banks play a very important role in supporting emergency, crucial, critical feeding needs now, in the form of ensuring that there's healthy access to food for free immediately, so that someone who is hungry has that resource or that place to go. And that, as we know, is in the form of a central food bank, such as in this region, it's Feed More. And then there are the food pantries, which are kind of the spokes out from that hub, often at faith-based community centers, et cetera, that provide that free food. A lot of the work that VCC does, and again, this is getting into some of the weeds, is we talk about building up a local food economy, which means we're trying to localize the circulation of healthy food grown or produced in the state and dollars, so that it's not your dollar or my dollar going to Kroger each time, but instead we're able to circulate locally grown food in a market opportunity where that locally grown food is available for purchase, and your purchasing power, that dollar, is going back to the farmer or is going to the locally owned grocery store. Food banks are an important part of ensuring someone can move or transition from being hungry to then having the position and the place to have that dollar and go buy food with it. But a great example to shout out, Feeding Southwest Virginia is historically a food bank. They're in Southwest Virginia, so they cover an incredibly large area of the state with their mobile markets, but they've actually just recently this year received a VFAIF award to be able to offer alongside their food pantry or their market. I'm sorry, they're a mobile food pantry. So they have a bus, it's free food, they drive into communities. But this VFAIF award and some of the other budgeting that they've done allows them to set up shop right next to that at the same location where their mobile food pantry is, an actual market where they're purchasing locally from area farmers and they're selling it alongside their free food. Often food banks don't necessarily have fresh food. They might have shelf stable things like cereal or crackers or bread, but they might not have as much of the fresh produce or the meat or the dairy. And so this mobile market alongside the mobile food pantry, I think, is a really great example of how those two work together. And VCC has provided technical assistance to make sure that marriage is sustainable and works for the community needs.
Okay, Lauren, the next question is, are there any urban farming initiatives that have been a part of the program?
Yeah, so I've talked a lot about dollars and money exchange, but one example of technical assistance that doesn't have to do with dollars is my time and where I'm able to support certain projects. And so I live in Richmond, Virginia, and in my own backyard in the north side of Richmond, along Brooklyn Park Boulevard, which is a historically Black community, we have been supported by a VFAIF grant. We are a part of a coalition. I'm a part of a coalition called the Northside Food Access Coalition to improve food access in the community. And one of the ways that we're doing that is through a farmer's market and a CSA share, which is community supported agriculture. And we are sourcing. So the market is on Thursdays. It's right behind Richmond Community High School. So we partner with the high school and the high school students there. It's right on the same property grounds as a community garden. The students have a garden there and are able to sell some of the produce that they grow in an urban garden or urban, less so farm, but more of a garden plot. And we source from urban farms in the area, no greater than probably 2 miles right now, exclusively Black or brown farmers who have a few acres here and there, or an acre or part of an acre. And we are able to source from them and collect or aggregate that produce and put it into these shares that people are able to buy. So for example, you get about 12 and a half, 13 pounds of food grown within 1 or 2 miles of the market from a Black or brown farmer for $25. And if you have SNAP EBT, you can use that and you actually get your purchase cut in half. So you get almost 13 pounds of food for about $12.50. And so that relies on the network of urban farms or urban ag producers in the area. And again, is back to thinking about how we are circulating both the produce locally, hyper locally in this case, and also the dollars hyper locally, so that that dollar at the market supports some of the market's operation, but then also ultimately goes back to the farmer so that they can sustain their production. I love talking about this. I'm a nerd. This is my jam. I love it. So like I could talk forever. I know we're nearing time. Please do reach out, even if it's just a question like this. You have my email, you have my phone number. It takes a village, each and every one of us. The unique thing is that we all have to buy food. We all have to eat food. And whether you're on the side of, I need to find food to eat because I'm hungry, or you're on the side of being able to, think about where your dollar goes. We at VCC, our program, are trying to connect those two ends of the spectrum in a way that's sustainable and supporting our communities. And so however I can help, whatever questions you have, I'm here to talk.
Thank you so much, Lauren, and thank you. I just want to make sure there's no more questions. And nope, I think we got them all. I want to just say, we're hopeful that everyone in attendance, you leave in the Lunch and Learn feeling more empowered and confident to proceed with seeking resources for your business through Virginia Community Capital, specifically for the sake of this conversation, through the Virginia Fresh Food Loan Fund, to learn more about Virginia Community Capital and the many ways in which we can support communities in Virginia. We just ask that you visit us online at vacommunitycapital.org. Again, vacommunitycapital.org. But you also have Lauren's information on the screen. Definitely strongly encourage you to take note of that, to reach out for any additional questions that may come up after the call. We ask that you visit us online as often as possible, just so that you can stay abreast of our virtual workshops and in-person workshops, but also just resources that we make available to the community. The recorded session will be sent out to you. You'll receive it by next week. We thank you for joining us. Have a happy rest of your Wednesday, and we look forward to having you join us again soon.
Thanks so much. Take care.
Thank you, Lauren.
Thanks, Melody.